the microphone?
No, I think I'm loud enough that everybody can hear me. So, if you can't tell, the accent's southern. So, we moved here a year and a half ago from the south. I would respectfully argue that Moscow is not very diverse, just from my personal background. And I commend the police department on all the community building efforts that they're making. But my question is specifically, what efforts is the community department, the police department, currently making to address racial stereotyping within the department? What sort of training do the officers go through if they're presented with that situation? It's nice to say that this is not an issue and we don't feel that way, but racism is firmly entrenched in our lives in America. I think a lot of us, whether we realize we have some racist tendencies or not, I think those come out in situations. So exactly what is the police department doing to train those officers for those situations?
Our academy itself, the first week, the new recruit goes in with such a spirit of, well, I'm glad I'm going to be a police officer and all this. The first thing they're approached with is ethics, followed by cultural diversity. It's so important through the Idaho Police Academy that they want that up front. And they want to understand that if you can't abide by the code of ethics that we follow, you don't need to be in this. And through that, it comes back, they go through our training program, which is the same way. And then throughout times, the last 2 years, we focused through our supervisors, and then it was such well accepted that we wanted it at a supervisory level. They said, let's get it to the officers. And we brought in individual from Texas that talked about ethics in itself and what is going on with the police and how many officers are spiraling out of control and what causes that. We followed that up last year with the Nobility of Policing, which talks about the importance of fundamental fairness. But when you talk about racism, we also have to span out too, that we have vulnerable and special needs people throughout this community too that we also have to address. Within the racism itself or any bias policing, that is a violation of our policy, and they are told that that is a terminating offense. So our training is continuous. Just had training this week on autism, just had it on elder abuse. So it's a continuing process that we also have to look at racism, but we also have to cover everything else too. And what the diversity we have, as she said, and Ziggy said, is race isn't just one, it is one area, it's a major area, but we are diverse in so many other ways, and we have to show that respect. But to come with the police department awareness and accountability is what we teach and what we train. And we also use it as a peer support and a peer pressure. Myself, and all law enforcement executives understand that you can pass the message down and hold it, but the one that's going to ensure is that person's partner, or that person that's riding with them, that works with them day in, day out. And when they start to move off compass, that's when it needs to be addressed, and it needs to be held at that point. And that's what we also encourage within our officers, is that the culture of accountability, respect, and cultural diversity was embedded in here before I came. Chief Weaver was an advocate of that and ensured that I think within the first year I had sensitivity training here. And I'm also from the South. And I came up here and I didn't think much of it after I took the job, but David Duke is not a well accepted name down in the South. There was times when I worked in Oklahoma City and I'd go through Louisiana, I didn't use my credit card because I didn't know what was going to be expected. But within that sense of having those filters that I grew up in segregation, I grew up in a culture where superior complexes was mostly the norm. It is reassuring to know that I can take that perspective and bring it here and know what respect means to appreciate a person for who they are, not what they're wearing, not the code, not what they walk, how they walk, or what they say. So that's where we go.
All right, we got several, so let's do one over here and we'll just bounce around. So go, yeah, you.
Professor at the University of Idaho. I Licensed Race and Ethnic Relations, and I've had the opportunity to talk with lots of students of color about their experiences with policing. And I know, based on those conversations, they certainly feel targeted in Moscow. So I was wondering if you, I was reading a paper today where someone said they don't drive after 9:30 anymore, they don't think it's safe. Are you keeping data to help look at the number of African Americans or Latinos in our community compared to the number of pullovers that they're making?
Let me get my glasses, or my eyes on. We pulled the citations numbers up because we got that up in Ferguson on how many people are written, and we broke it down by race. You know, within our citations over a 4-year period, this goes back to January of 11, we wrote a little over 7,000 tickets. So don't let it bring you forth that that's a lot of tickets. So we average about 1,200 tickets, and that's both criminal and traffic. So it's a combination. Of those, blacks were issued 2% of the time. They were issued in that time, 2% received citations of the overall. Indian Native Americans were 1%, Asians were 1%, Hispanics were 1%, and then we go into that none listed because you have to look at it every once in a while. That sometimes the officers or something occurs and we don't have to look. It's an unknown. So that's just where the statistics are within the demographics of people who are cited.
So it does sound like about twice as many.
Twice as many what?
She said there were 1% of the population is black, she said 2% are getting tickets. She said 26 are native, and you said a little over 1 are getting tickets. So you are, in fact, targeting people of color.
Well, if you take the number of 1.1 and then you say 2%, then I don't know if I can agree with that number. I'd have to calculate it out, but it was 139 citations of the 7,054 that were written.
I mean, I guess 2 times just seems like a lot to me, but I guess that's normal.
Okay, so we'll jump back after that. Yeah, can you use the microphone? We can't hear you.
Isn't that statistic going to be flawed anyway? Because, like, diversity in Moscow is very slim, so if you're giving that small percentage to the black population here, but that considering how many people actually live here that are black, that's kind
There's
of,
250 black people and there's 139 tickets for black people, that's a lot.
yeah.
I'm not going to say that we're targeting black people. You can make those justifications through what you're saying, but that doesn't
But you're the
mean
one doing it, shouldn't you be justifying your action?
before I was interrupted. What I'm saying is, sometimes the same person gets 1 or 2 or 3 tickets. So within that justification, it's not that there are that many people.
So it's just
Across
that
the
if a
board.
black person gets a ticket, that person's more likely to get 3. Not that you're targeting
Okay,
them.
we're arguing, we're not asking questions, and that's not what you said, actually, so. Yes.
No.
That's all right.
No,
Go ahead.
you go ahead.
Okay. It's hard to point, there's too many people out there.
I was sort of bringing it back to Ferguson. I know an issue with the Ferguson Police Department that was brought up a lot was the lack of diversity within the department. What is Moscow PD's diversity? Does it have any in terms of race and ethnicity? I mean, I know we've been expanding the definition of diversity, but I think in terms of Ferguson, it goes back to race and ethnicity.
Within the 32 officers I currently have, 30 are white and 2 are Hispanic. What I reach out to you now is we'll be hiring 4 within the next 5 months. If you have people that are very interested in applying, I will be very opportunist to have them come and talk with me and discuss what it is. Because of what's been going on, we usually try to do community rooting because that is important for this community to be reflective of the officers, because that's what's been brought up so much in Ferguson is compared to the 88% white and then the other. What we want to do is bring the best person in no matter what they are. I get a little disappointed when I go in at the testing and then all I see are males that are there. I would really want more women in the police department than we currently have. We have 3, and we have 1 reserve that's coming on, and then we have some more reserves coming on. Nationally, that's about average, where you see women in law enforcement, they make a small percentage of the diversity within itself. But yes, we are advertising, and this is the first time we went out on the minority report, where we're reaching out to the minority across the nation. Come to Moscow, but we also have to say, well, how would they want to come to Moscow?
Yes.
I'm Al Chinister from KRP, I just wondered, rather than ask the question to the panel, a show of hands, if you've encountered people with racist attitudes or experienced racism in your experience in Moscow. So it's not just a Ferguson problem, it's here, although it might not be as obvious as
Thank you.
Questions over on this side? Go ahead. Yeah. You want to come up to the mic right there, then they'll be able to hear you. Then
You
get
can
mic
use that
there.
one. You can use that one.
Oh, that one's on too?
Yeah, that one's on.
Okay.
First one, I'd point out a little awkward here, that's not happened, asked when there's so, but I was curious too. Let's see how I think about this. Well, you mentioned that, is this just police related stuff that we're doing?
You can ask any question you want to the panel. Yeah, any member of the panel.
This panel, this is what I was just asking the panel. What do you think of the notion that, when it comes to the conversations about race and racism, where there are, we're involving people of color and white people, and possibly what we think of the idea that white people should in general listen more than they talk, because people of color have more personal experience of what race is actually like, and white people do not have the same kind of experience of oppression, and also white people have a privileged position.
Who would like to respond?
I could respond to that. I think that is a great idea, and I think, like I mentioned, the way things get better is through discussion, through communication. And I actually read the blog that was posted on the Facebook event page. I don't know if other people read it, but the bloggers spoke about how people would much rather just have open communication about race rather than racism. And that goes also kind of hand in hand with privilege and how people don't often want to come to reality and I guess, hear what they don't want to hear. So I think that, yes, a conversation, and I believe this event is called A Conversation on Race, so we are having this conversation already. But it would definitely be helpful to have something reoccurring and something joint with more students, with more community members as well.
Can I say a couple things real quick?
I talked very briefly about this in my presentation, this concept of critical thinking, and I think it speaks directly to the question. White people have to listen because we cannot internalize the experience of being a person of color in our society. We just can't do it. We can understand it intellectually, we cannot internalize it. What I try to explain to my journalists is that you have to not just listen, you have to actively turn on that part of your brain that allows you to, as best you can, walk in the other person's shoes. So it's more than passive listening. It's really trying to understand as best you can. And I would suggest that that same responsibility rests with all parties of the conversation. One of the tenets of civic and public journalism is that to resolve a problem in a community, any problem, an intractable problem in a community, people have to find their common interests. It's called coming to public judgment. There's a working through process, and it doesn't work until members of the community from all points of view understand people who see the opposite. So I would make this radical suggestion that it is also necessary for all of us to walk in the shoes of people who have internalized systemic racist attitudes, who see Ferguson from a point of view of looting and violence as opposed to white privilege and police-community relations. Until we understand that dynamic, we can't have this conversation. It requires all of us to step out of our comfort zone. We are all, frankly, way too inclined to seek out that comfort zone in conversations about race, because it is so difficult. So that's my point.